Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're looking at a truly powerful passage from the Bible today. If you've ever felt like you're putting in all the effort, sweating it out, but still just hitting a brick wall, well, the source text we're analyzing today offers a totally fascinating perspective. It explores this idea of faith, not as some human achievement or something we just conjure up out of nowhere, but as an absolute, total dependence on God. We're going to break down the text, dig into its historical context, and look at some really practical applications.
Right off the bat, let's look at our key verse. Matthew 17:20 says, "He replied, 'Because you have so little faith. Truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you.'" This is Jesus speaking, and he is laying down a massive foundational truth about how spiritual power actually works.
So to outline the big picture first, before we really get into the weeds here, spiritual work relies on God's power, period. Not our human effort and not our past experience. Look, when we face mountains in our lives, our default human response is almost always just to try harder, right? We want to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. But this text teaches a core truth of Reformed Calvinism theology, which is that our human effort is entirely insufficient on its own. True spiritual work means we have to completely step out of the way and rely on the sovereign power of God.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The mustard seed faith. 2. When effort isn't enough. 3. Present faith over past experience. 4. Small faith, powerful God. 5. Steps for college students. And 6. A daily dependence.
Section 1. The Mustard Seed Faith, a Lesson in Dependence.
Okay, so to really grasp the rest of our explainer, we absolutely need to define our terms. Faith is not just a one-time decision you make and forget about. And it's definitely not a feeling of intense personal strength or, some emotional hype. In this biblical context, faith is a daily living dependence on God. It's waking up every single morning and honestly acknowledging that without Him, you can't do anything. It is an active, ongoing trust.
Section 2. When effort isn't enough. The disciples' failure.
So, the crucial point is understanding the historical context of what actually happened right before Jesus talked about that mustard seed. In Matthew 17, Jesus' followers, the disciples, are completely unable to cast out a demon from a young boy. And what makes this so fascinating is that they had done similar things successfully before. They had been given the authority, they were definitely trying hard, putting in maximum effort, but they still failed. Jesus steps in and identifies the real issue. It wasn't a lack of effort or that they had the wrong technique, it was a lack of faith. They were relying on their own ability instead of trusting in Him.
Moving on to Section 3, Present Faith over Past Experience. Lesson 1.
Let's compare two totally different approaches here. On one side, we have relying on past experience. This is exactly what the disciples did. They just assumed that because God worked through them yesterday, they naturally had the juice to do it again today, all on their own. They basically treated faith like a battery they had charged up once, and now they were good to go. But on the other side, we have present faith. And this is exactly what Jesus demands. It's a current, living, personal dependence on God. Faith literally cannot be secondhand, and it cannot live in the past. What worked yesterday, it won't sustain you today unless you are actively depending on God right now, in this very moment.
Section 4. Small Faith, Powerful God. Lesson 2. Now, what's really interesting about this is that it demands a profound shift in our focus. Naturally, we obsess over the size of our faith, right? We look inward and ask, do I feel strong enough? Do I have enough belief? But Jesus flips this completely on its head and points to the power of God. Think about this. A mustard seed is incredibly tiny. We're talking only about 1 to 2 millimeters across, yet it can grow into a massive plant over 10 feet tall. Jesus uses this to show us that the issue isn't the size of your faith, it's where it is placed. Even a tiny 1 millimeter faith is totally enough when it's placed in an omnipotent God. The focus is entirely on where your faith is directed, not how much of it you possess.
Which brings us to Section 5, Steps for College Students, How to Live It Out.
Now let's focus on the implications of this data for a very specific group, college students. Campus life is just full of immense pressure, anxiety, and this endless demand to perform. So here is a really clear step-by-step process described in our source material. Step 1. Start each day intentionally depending on God. Before you even check your phone or sprint to class, deliberately acknowledge that yesterday's strength simply won't carry you through today's exams or relational drama. Step 2. When you hit a wall, when studying feels literally impossible or you feel totally ineffective in a campus group, pause and pray. Our instinct is always to just try harder and grind it out.
Stop, pray instead. And step 3, continuously ask God to grow your dependence on Him in every single moment, whether it's for a massive final exam or just a quiet conversation in the dining hall.
Continuing that step-by-step process, especially for students who are involved in ministry or serving their peers. Step 1 here, bring your small, weak faith to God honestly. Seriously, don't wait until you feel strong enough to serve or speak up. He works with mustard seeds. Step 2, and this is absolutely critical, remind yourself that only God can truly change hearts. You can't fix your roommates, you can't produce spiritual outcomes in your friends, only He can. Our role is strictly to depend on Him. And step 3, pray specifically and regularly. Trust God to do the heavy lifting that you, fundamentally, cannot do on your own.
Section 6. A daily dependence. Conclusion.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core conclusion of our research today. Depend fully on God. When we finally recognize our own total inability and His absolute power, everything changes. The pressure just comes right off our shoulders. We aren't called to manufacture some massive superhuman faith. We are just called to take our tiny mustard seed faith and place it squarely in the hands of a God for whom nothing is impossible.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with these 2 questions to think deeply about. First, where have you been relying on past experiences instead of actively depending on God today? And second, what would it actually look like for you to trust God with even mustard seed faith in a specific area of your life this week? Think about that mountain sitting right in front of you. Stop trying to move it with your own effort. Depend fully on Him and just watch what He can do. Thanks so much for joining me, and I highly encourage you to take these truths with you into your week.